Hundreds of millions of dollars in the state's unemployment system has not been tracked properly. Even the state admits their bookkeeping was shoddy. Test. A rural school district's plan to return to normal during the pandemic. We're watching for a sign of concern for the state in recent COVID numbers. And restaurants look back on the temporary restrictions that have now lasted a year. They tell us they're preparing to serve up something new. Optimism. All that is next. When did you last balance your checkbook? Can't remember? Me neither. And same for Colorado's unemployment office. State audit released today basically shrugged its shoulders at trying to figure out how much money really has come in and out of the unemployment fund. A shoulder shrug during an audit, not good. Marshall Zellinger tries to follow the money that the state could not.
Audits are boring, but not this one. This audit of the state's unemployment insurance fund came to a conclusion we kind of knew. Hundreds of millions of dollars can't be tracked, at least through the end of June 2020. It doesn't mean the money didn't go to where it was supposed to, but it doesn't mean it did either. The audit could not verify $500 million paid into the unemployment fund from business owners and from Congress's CARES Act. The audit could also not verify $872 million in outstanding claims from those seeking unemployment as of June 30th, 2020.
Yes, our books on this were a little shoddy for the auditors, and we have gone back and addressed, and we are working to make sure that this, again, does not happen.
Colorado's Department of Labor and Employment received 5 years worth of unemployment claims last year, the majority coming in just a month and a half between March 15th and April 30th. CDLE provided accounting for the money in and money out. The state auditor just isn't satisfied with the receipts.
We did make retroactive adjustments to our accounting books, but that was late, and again, that was using methodology that the auditors just didn't quite agree with us on that.
The unemployment insurance fund is currently in the negative $930 million. That means the state is borrowing money to pay unemployment claims. The fund will eventually get back to zero and into positive dollar amounts, but that requires an increase to the premiums that businesses pay. Business owners pay a tax on employee wages to fund unemployment payments. This year, that premium went up, and it will likely go up again next year. This means businesses will be asked to pay more. At the same time, an audit cannot tell those businesses where their money went.
I think we can sow confidence in what we're doing moving forward to make sure that, just to your point, that every dollar that a business pays in to our trust fund is accurately accounted for, and we can trace it from point A to point B on where it goes.
Not being a business owner, I was curious how the fund gets replenished and how that math works. It's some sort of equation based on the number of employees you have, how much you've paid into the system, and how much is actually in the fund, which we know right now is getting close to negative $1 billion. Speaking of, Kyle, I would love to write checks knowing that I could get to negative billion and still be okay.
Yeah, it depends on whose pocket the money's coming out of, I suppose, Marshall. I will say, I mean, this has been a pretty brutal 12 months for that agency, for the folks at Labor and Employment. On a couple of issues, they have at least come forward to say, we get why people say that there's a problem with the call centers, with getting payments out, with their online system, now with their audit. And I guess the question just becomes is how much patience do people have for the state and its agencies after so many whoopsies?
I'm sure the people who are expecting the unemployment money have less patience, but the state has been working with unemployment about this prior to the audit being released today. And I will say one thing in the audit, they lost their top 2 in the finance department just before the pandemic. So that's a hard way to keep bookkeeping when you've lost the people who are responsible for the bookkeeping.
That makes sense, certainly. All right, thank you, Marshall. High plateaus. Great for hikes, not great for COVID-19 case numbers. The state's health leaders are talking today about us being stuck on a kind of high plateau. So cases are drastically reduced from their worst peak before the holidays, but they never have fallen to last summer's lows. We've just kind of hit this high plateau. The state said it's watching that, I'd say more with caution than real concern. Some good news from today's briefing. They think that 1 in 5 of us, more than that actually, has some sort of immunity.
We're heading towards more and more Coloradans being immune because either they've had the infection or because they've been immunized. So the total reaching about 22% of the population immune, hopefully no longer susceptible to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And you can see the rise that's coming as vaccination ticks up.
So we know that a little bit more than 13% of Coloradans with immunity have it through the vaccine. That's more than 754,000 of our neighbors. Slow climb on these numbers. 475,000 people are waiting on their second dose of Pfizer or Moderna. Remember, 20% of the population in the total pie is too young to be vaccinated, according to the FDA. Our hospitalization numbers tick back up again for the second day in a row. We're at 341 patients. That's up 13 in a day. State is watching this closely as well to see if what we're seeing is a normal flux or whether this is the start of a discouraging trend upward. This time last week, 299 patients. Our in-house COVID coverage guru, Chris Vanderveen, describes this as a bit of a blind spot right now because of reduced testing during the snowstorm. But 4.3% of tests came back positive yesterday. That brings our 7-day average for positivity up to 3.8%. So this is going to make me sound like an old man, but spitting in school when I was growing up would get you in big trouble. Nowadays, the kids call that COVID testing. Here's Mark Salinger.
It's been a little weird and different.
High school isn't always easy. High school in the middle of a pandemic is even stranger.
The worst part of my year has been wrestling being canceled here.
A lot of normal sounding things like prom and sports and graduation have been canceled this year. Campbell Houston wants to get those back.
Like school with a mask.
He's one of a handful of students at Clear Creek High School who have already signed up to get tested for COVID twice a week at school. The testing program is set to begin in the next 2 weeks, just as Campbell begins his senior football season.
My parents are older and they've both had the vaccine, but still I'm going to be coming into contact with people who I don't know.
It's still a relatively new thing to say, we're going to administer a test at school that's got to do with your health. That's weird.
Weird? Sure. But in the eyes of Clear Creek School Superintendent Karen Quanbeck, regular COVID testing at school could stop outbreaks before they happen. All it takes is something kids already do.
How can you not want to spit in a cup at school, right? Like there's a certain element of fun to that.
It sounds weird, but the school year has been weird.
There's that word again, weird. Brian Tracy is a school counselor in Clear Creek. He'll get tested twice a week as well. Last Thursday, the county held a vaccine clinic for staff to get their second doses. The next day, nearly 40% called out sick.
Brand new staff member Ethan in the IT department helped cook lunch for the student body here.
May have superglued fingers together, helping some fourth grade art projects.
Principals were in classrooms. The superintendent taught art. And if there's ever been an example of why everyone wants everything to get back to normal, this is it.
Folks start letting their supervisors know, I'm pulled over in a parking lot throwing up. Don't come in. We'll figure it out.
And the school district was supposed to have the vaccine clinic on Friday. Then the impending snowstorm made them push it to Thursday. Of course, it didn't start snowing until Saturday. And by that point, Kyle, everybody had already called in sick the day before.
Mark, you've been in touch with the folks there in Clear Creek County for a couple of months now. Do you get a read on how the students up there are doing?
Yeah, Brian, the school counselor who I was speaking with today, he was telling me that he's connected a lot of students to mental health resources, a lot more than in previous years. And they gave me a sneak peek of what their yearbook looks like this year. On the back, it just says, "We survived," which pretty much tells the whole story of this year.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Mark Salinger reporting from the beautiful Athenaeum of the palatial Salinger Estate. Mark, thank you. There is good news for the people who depend on baseball season at Coors Field to make some money. States again updating the rules for the Rockies season. Nolan Arenado still gone, but you will be able to bring in food from outside Coors Field. And most importantly, that means a return to business for the vendors who set up outside on Blake Street and sell you the drinks and the snacks cheaper than you can buy them inside. No sharing snacks with Dinger, though. First off, it's not clear if Dinger has a mouth hole to eat. And secondly, the state's rules prohibit the mascot from interacting with fans.
It's been a year since restaurants could open to full capacity. Ask restaurant owners and workers how long it's felt like.
For someone to say, oh, it's only a year, we're thinking, you know what, it felt like an eternity.
The longest year, with hope, they say, on the horizon.
When I look at you, I know our future is bright.
And the vice president popped into town. Colorado's journalists were not allowed close enough to ask questions, but a 9-year-old who was in the room at least brought up an interesting topic. Next.
More snow has moved into the area, and we are continuing to see the heavier snowfall in the mountain areas and in the foothills. And we also have some warnings and advisories off to the southeast. But as we go throughout the rest of the evening and overnight hours, we'll continue just to see on and off snowfall throughout the Denver metro. Those higher totals are looking to stay further south. And then eventually it all moves out by midday Wednesday. Behind that, we have clearing skies over the next couple of days. But with the snow that we are seeing tonight, most of us will see trace amounts to maybe a couple of inches, those higher totals in the foothills and mountain areas. And we also have a blizzard warning in effect, as well as a winter weather advisory and a winter storm warning. This is all going to be south and southeast of the Denver metro. Here tonight, we're expecting overnight lows near 25 degrees, those showers sticking around until early Wednesday, and then temperatures warming until Saturday.
That is Lauren Robinson. You'll catch her on 9 News Weekend mornings and all over the place from time to time. Vice President Kamala Harris came to Colorado today, part of the national tour promoting the Biden administration's $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. Her events were closed to the public and to local journalists. The vice president did take questions from a pre-selected group that included some small business owners at Maria Empanadas on Broadway. A 9-year-old in the audience, Madhvi Chatur, brought up the rise in plastic pollution worldwide, exacerbated by all of our takeout orders during the pandemic.
To what you are doing, to say, let us save our planet, and do it with a sense of urgency. Yes. And that is just spectacular, and that's exactly how great things happen when they're born out of that kind of passion from people of every age. I'm going to ask one of our policy people to follow up with you. How about that? Yes. Okay. Yes.
The video of that exchange and the rest of the vice president's visit was provided by a pool camera from a national media outlet.
A year ago today, the governor put a temporary pause on indoor dining. Turned out to be not so temporary. The restaurant industry and its people have been hurting since.
Almost every week we hear of a restaurant going out of business, closing down. That definitely does not help our mental state.
Those business owners tell us about the hope they see now. Next.
March 16th, 2020, a year ago today, was the last day that Denver's restaurants were open without restrictions. It's been a year. A year ago today, the governor put the kibosh on large gatherings. The governor pointed out there were likely thousands of undetected COVID cases around the state, so he shut down gyms, and theaters, and casinos. The governor directed bars and restaurants to move to the model of takeout and delivery only for what he said was going to be 30 days.
These are very difficult decisions, the goal of which are to reduce the severity and duration of this public health crisis. Again, you don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish. If you try to squeeze a few more days or week of business into bars and clubs, you'd be looking at a much longer absolute closure and more drastic measures as a result of the lack of foresight.
You know, like or dislike that decision, a lot of people hope that it would at least be true, but the sped up return to normalcy did not happen. Colorado's restaurants, generally speaking, are still maxed out at 50% indoor capacity, and here we are a year later. You got to look at all the small businesses that have closed in that time. Denver alone has lost dozens of restaurants, and there are even more that are temporarily closed. The restaurants that are still hanging on, still open, struggling to make it to the other end of the temporary restrictions.
And it's eatery help you. This is lunch, typical lunch. After the pandemic hit, right, with COVID, we really never recovered. My wife and I own this restaurant. We opened our business in May 2019. The growing year is the year that we didn't make any money on. So the year turned 2020. January, we had the best month since we opened. February was very good, and then March is when the pandemic hit, and we had to shut down. Last March 2020, almost every week we hear of a restaurant going out of business, closing down. That definitely does not help our mental state. It feels like this has been going on forever. In addition to the shutdown, trying to manage the restaurant, we still have to school the kids. And that's a big challenge. For someone to say, oh, it's only a year, we're thinking, you know what, it felt like an eternity. We see that there are more and more people getting out again. We actually have a lot of confidence because we made it this far. Either vegan pork. I'll take pork. If the weekends hold up and the weekdays pick up a little more, I think we should be okay. We're crossing our fingers that we are almost out of this pandemic thing. Okay, enjoy. We are looking forward to start making some money.
We appreciate those businesses sharing their stories with us, pardon me, through the lens of photojournalist Tom Cole. All right, so here's your scenario. You want to go for a bike ride, but there's 2 feet of snow on the ground. What do? You do the most Colorado thing we saw today. Next. The most Colorado thing we saw all this weekend, really, were the ways that people were getting around in the snow. There's no bad weather for a bike ride in Denver. Ryan was walking around Cheeseman Park yesterday when he spotted a group of what the local news calls outdoor enthusiasts. We call them that because look how enthusiastic they are about the outdoors.
So here I am in the backcountry of Colorado. Got my snowshoes on. Just kidding. I'm in Loveland.
Come on, would you have believed him with the beard, though? I mean, like, dude looks like he's in the backcountry. Justin had us fooled there. Needed the snowshoes, though, to get around at his place in Loveland yesterday. He tied the rake to the paddle to knock the snow off of his trees. You've got an implement on both ends as you go through the trees like that. Pile your feedback tonight. Jesse says, really? Calling out government officials for not knowing how long the pandemic would last in March of 2020. Stay classy, he says. Jesse, there's no call out. It was just when this happened back in March 2020, there were people who were pleased with the governor's decisions, people who opposed the governor's decisions. What I said tonight is I think everybody at that point hoped that it would be true, that it would just be a short shutdown. And it wasn't. It's not a call out. That's just what happened. Phil says, why did the vice president come to Denver just days after one of the worst storms in history? How much money was spent on this? Phil, I'll be honest with you, we talked about the same thing during the Trump administration. The presidents and their administration officials are going to travel. It's part of what they do. Of all the things to get outraged about in the world, I really don't think this is one of them. I've seen zero indication that the vice president's visit interfered with anything on the ground. Randy writes in to say your attitude and zeal is concerning. First time we've mentioned zeal. And a text in tonight that just says, no, no, no. You should be in your basement in front of the woodpile when you do next. Do you have a preference on this? Does it matter to you? You're in charge. You tell us. I don't know. See you next time.